A brilliant light tears through the sky, a voice reverberates for one alone, and a man collapses to the ground. Paul's conversion, an event of seismic magnitude in the history of Christianity, has always fascinated and intrigued. Was this an unquestionable manifestation of the divine, an absolute miracle that defies reason? Or could we, in light of modern science, find a more earthly explanation, perhaps within the complex realms of neurology? Prepare for a journey that will make you question the boundaries between faith and science, between the inexplicable and the clinically observable. To understand the depth of our central theme, it is essential to delve into the narrative that originated it. The encounter of Saul of Tarsus on the road to Damascus is richly detailed in the book of Acts of the Apostles. This was no ordinary glow, but a light of overwhelming intensity, so powerful that it struck him to the ground. Additional testimonies, found elsewhere in Acts, describe this light as brighter than the sun at midday, reinforcing its extraordinary nature. And then, the voice, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" Most intriguing is what follows. The men accompanying him witnessed the event. They stood speechless, hearing the voice but seeing no one. Here lies one of the first layers of mystery. The voice was audible, but its source, visible and intelligible only to Saul, remained invisible or distorted for the others. This detail is often cited as evidence of the supernatural character of the experience, suggesting a direct and personal communication that transcended common perception. Saul was no ordinary man. He was a zealous Pharisee, a scholar of Mosaic law, and a relentless persecutor of Christians. He got up from the ground, but though his eyes were open, he could see nothing. For 3 days, he remained in Damascus without eating or drinking, in a state of profound reflection and possibly anguish and reorientation. His blindness was not merely physical. It was a symbol of the spiritual blindness of his former life and the process of seeing the world in a completely new way. This event of such extreme sensory and emotional violence culminated in his healing by Ananias, a disciple of Jesus who, initially fearful, was divinely instructed to seek out Saul, and in the subsequent transformation from Saul, the persecutor, to Paul the Apostle, one of the greatest disseminators of Christianity, responsible for a significant portion of the New Testament and the expansion of the Christian message to the Gentile world. It is from this detailed description and these radical consequences that the question arises: what truly happened on the road to Damascus? Was this an irrefutable divine miracle, or a manifestation of something that modern science, with its growing knowledge of the human brain, can begin to unravel? The complexity and uniqueness of this event serve as the fundamental foundation for our exploration, as it holds the origin of our fascinating central theme. Driven by a fervent conviction that he was defending the purity of Judaism against what he saw as a dangerous heresy, his mission to Damascus was none other than to imprison and bring back to Jerusalem any followers of Jesus he found. He had formal authority, with letters from the high priest, to arrest men and women, demonstrating the level of his dedication and vehemence. This is the crucial starting point for our analysis, as the magnitude of his initial hostility makes his subsequent transformation even more astonishing. The description of the event is vivid. Suddenly, a light from heaven flashed around him. After the encounter, the consequences were immediate and drastic. Saul became blind. Paul's experience on the road to Damascus, with its dazzling light, heavenly voice, and subsequent blindness, while singular in its impact, is not an isolated event in the vast panorama of human accounts of encounters with the extraordinary. History, both sacred and secular, is replete with narratives where individuals describe visions, auditions, and intense sensations that they interpret as divine messages, profound revelations, or contacts with other realities. By exploring these parallels, we begin to illustrate the diverse ways our central theme manifests in different contexts, allowing for a more comprehensive analysis. Within the Old Testament itself, we find prominent figures like Moses, who witnessed the burning bush, a flame that burned without consuming, and heard the voice of God, receiving instructions to free Israel. Are these all direct manifestations of the transcendent? Or is there a common underlying neurophysiology that can be activated under certain conditions, leading to experiences subjectively interpreted as divine? By presenting these examples and initial manifestations, we do not seek to invalidate religious experience, but rather to enrich our understanding of the phenomenon of Paul's conversion, situating it within a broader spectrum of extraordinary human experiences. Understanding these parallels is crucial for contextualizing the discussion between miracle and neurological attack, opening doors for a deeper analysis in the next chapter. Prophets like Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel frequently report complex and detailed visions, accompanied by intense physical and emotional experiences that commission them for their missions. Saints and mystics from various faiths, such as Teresa of Avila in Christianity, Rumi in Sufi Islam, and practitioners of deep meditation in Buddhist and Hindu traditions, have described altered states of consciousness, heightened sensory perceptions, feelings of union with the divine, and hearings of voices or celestial music. Reports of near-death experiences also frequently include elements like a bright light, the sensation of leaving the body, and encounters with beings or voices. What do these accounts, separated by cultures, eras, and beliefs, have in common? Isaiah saw the Lord seated on a high and exalted throne. Ezekiel had visions of celestial beings and divine chariots. Daniel and Zechariah also had vivid prophetic visions, sometimes requiring interpretation by angelic beings. These biblical narratives demonstrate a rich tapestry of altered sensory experiences associated with divine contact. In the New Testament, besides Paul the Apostle, John had the apocalyptic visions on the island of Patmos described with impressive sensory detail, including sounds like thunder and voices of many waters and visions of celestial beings and cosmic events. Beyond Scripture, countless religious and spiritual traditions around the world contain accounts of mystical experiences and ecstasies that echo elements of Paul's conversion. The recurrence of elements such as bright lights, distinct and meaningful voices, sensations of dizziness or falling, and a profound alteration in the individual's mental state and perception of reality invites us to reflect. Having explored historical accounts of visions and voices, it's time to delve into the depths of neuroscience to understand how the human brain can generate experiences that remarkably resemble those lived by Paul. The focus here falls on temporal lobe epilepsy, a neurological condition that has become a central point in the discussion about Paul's conversion due to its vast and complex range of symptoms. Unlike the generalized tonic-clonic seizures that many associate with epilepsy, TLE seizures, particularly those called complex partial seizures, are often more subtle and can be mistakenly interpreted as psychotic episodes, trances, or even possession due to their subjective nature and rich perceptual and emotional content, many of which can simulate or be interpreted as mystical phenomena. TLE is characterized by abnormal electrical discharges originating in the temporal lobes of the brain, regions crucial for memory, emotion, hearing, smell, and even for the formation of meaning and coherence in our experiences. Simultaneously, they may hear voices, music, buzzing, or strange sounds, which are completely real to the individual but non-existent to external observers. The temporal lobe, especially the auditory cortex, is a primary area for sound processing, and its dysfunction can generate these internal auditions. Distortions in the perception of time and space can also occur, leading to a sense of unreality or being in a different dimension. The manifestations of TLE are incredibly varied and connect directly with Paul's experience. Visual and auditory hallucinations. TLE patients may report intense flashes of light, vibrant colors, visions of figures or complex scenes, or even temporary functional blindness where vision is impaired without eye damage. The amygdala and hippocampus, located in the temporal lobe, are crucial emotional and memory centers, and their abnormal activation can generate these states. Due to the proximity of the olfactory and taste processing areas in the temporal lobe, abnormal olfactory and gustatory sensations, unusual perfumes, unpleasant smells, or strange tastes can arise abruptly without any external stimulus. Perceptual and consciousness alterations, phenomena like déjà vu and jamais vu are common, reflecting a dysfunction in memory recall and recognition. Some individuals with TLE develop an intense preoccupation with religious and spiritual matters, with the world appearing infused with sacred meaning. They may feel in direct contact with the divine, have mystical or prophetic visions, and develop an unusual religious fervor, often culminating in a complete reorientation of their lives around a spiritual mission. The electrical discharges in these regions can generate a neural storm that internally simulates events of great sensory and emotional impact. By detailing the internal workings of TLE and showing how it operates through these symptoms, we realize that medicine offers a set of mechanisms that can, in fact, replicate many elements of Paul's experience. This deepened understanding is crucial for the next stage of our analysis, where we will apply this neurological lens directly to the biblical accounts. Sudden and intense emotional states. TLE seizures can induce overwhelming sensations of fear, dread, anxiety, ecstasy, euphoria, profound sadness, or epiphany, often without an apparent trigger and with disproportionate intensity. Automatisms, involuntary and repetitive movements, such as chewing, lip smacking, picking at clothes, or wandering aimlessly, are frequent during seizures, and the individual may have no memory of what they did. Dissociative phenomena and depersonalization, sensations of being out of body, as if observing oneself from afar, or that the environment or one's own body are not real. Hyperreligiosity, one of the most notable and relevant aspects for our discussion. Interictal personality. Between seizures, some patients may exhibit specific personality traits, such as meticulousness, seriousness, obsessive adherence to rules, a tendency to philosophize about life and the universe, and an exaggerated moral concern. The anomalous activation of temporal lobe structures, such as the hippocampus and amygdala, and adjacent areas in the cerebral cortex, can explain the richness and intensity of these experiences. With a deepened understanding of temporal lobe epilepsy and its diverse manifestations, it is now imperative that we focus on the biblical accounts of Paul's conversion and apply a clinical lens to examine each symptom. This detailed analysis will allow us to draw remarkable parallels between Paul's experience and the diagnostic criteria and phenomena associated with TLE, making the neurological hypothesis more tangible and in-depth. Let's dissect the events on the road to Damascus, point by point, in light of neuroscience. The dazzling light and sudden fall. The text describes a light from heaven so intense that Saul fell to the ground. From a TLE perspective, complex visual hallucinations are a known symptom and can include intense flashes of light, vibrant colors, or even the sensation of being enveloped by an overwhelming light. The description of a light brighter than the sun at midday is consistent with the intensity that an ictal discharge can induce. This blindness was not caused by direct eye damage, which makes it even more intriguing and aligns it with a neurological phenomenon. The postictal period can last for hours, days, or, in more severe cases of status epilepticus or repeated seizures, even longer. The most prominent apostle and missionary of Christianity, who dedicated his life to preaching the gospel, enduring persecutions, imprisonments, and martyrdom. This drastic change in life, purpose, and personality is one of the greatest enigmas and pieces of evidence of the experience's power. specifically TLE, offers a cohesive and consistent explanation for the events that unfolded on the road to Damascus, without necessarily denying the spiritual and transformative impact of Paul's experience. However, hyperreligiosity is a well-documented characteristic in some TLE patients, known as one of the components of Geschwind syndrome. Individuals with TLE can develop intense religious devotion, a sense of divine mission, and a profound preoccupation with spiritual matters, which can be radically different from their previous beliefs. The seizure experience mediated by alterations in the temporal lobe can infuse a transcendent meaning into everyday events and the individual's own life, leading to a complete reorientation of their existence and an unwavering conviction in their new faith or purpose. The depth of Paul's conviction and his tireless preaching can be viewed through this lens as manifestations of a neurologically altered mind, yet no less genuine in its perception of truth. It is characterized by a state of profound mental confusion, disorientation, extreme fatigue, and, in some cases, temporary neurological deficits that may include aphasia, amnesia, or pertinently functional visual loss or distortion. The refusal to eat and drink during these 3 days can be explained by the profound state of confusion and dissociation that accompanies a prolonged postictal period where basic physiological functions may be secondary to the intensity of the internal experience and brain recovery. Furthermore, the light may have caused temporary functional blindness where the eyes are physically intact, but the brain cannot process visual information, generating a kind of internal white screen. The sudden fall in turn can be a reflex of surprise and sudden disorientation in the face of such an overwhelming sensory stimulus, but it can also be a motor component of an epileptic seizure resulting in loss of muscle tone or convulsive movements that lead to falling. The sudden and involuntary loss of balance is a significant neurological sign. The voice audible only to Paul and its clarity. Saul's companions heard the voice but saw no one, or, in other versions, heard a sound but did not understand the words. This is a crucial point for the neurological hypothesis. For Paul, the voice was clear, intelligible, and uttered direct and specific words. "Saul, why do you persecute me?" Focal auditory hallucinations, where the voice is perceived with crystal clarity and profound meaning by the affected individual, but is inaudible to others or perceived by them only as an indistinct sound, are a classic manifestation of seizures in the temporal lobe, especially in areas like the auditory cortex and Wernicke's and Broca's areas associated with language processing and meaning. The selectivity of the voice as perception strengthens the hypothesis of an experience generated internally in Saul's brain, but with absolute realism for him. The 3 days of blindness and the postictal state. After the event, Saul could see nothing and had to be led. The radical transformation of Saul into Paul and hyperreligiosity. From Saul, the fierce and zealous persecutor of the law, to Paul, by focusing on this unique facet of the clinical analysis of symptoms, the hypothesis of a neurological attack. The question of whether Paul's conversion had a neurological component raises an even bigger inquiry. If the brain can mediate experiences we interpret as divine, does this invalidate the validity of faith or the existence of a spiritual realm? To answer this, we need to explore a fascinating and emerging field: neurotheology, also known as the neuroscience of religion. For example, the activation of areas in the parietal lobe involved in spatial orientation, the sense of self. Paul's experience, therefore, can be viewed not as just a neurological event that negates the divine. Instead of a competition for a single truth, we can envision a complementarity. Neuroscience can help us understand the how of religious experiences, the brain mechanisms that accompany them, the neural pathways involved in perceiving lights, voices, or sensations of ecstasy. Theology and spirituality, in turn, can help us understand the why, and for what purpose of these experiences, the meaning, purpose, message, and transformative impact they have on people's lives and on human history, but as a complex interaction where the divine manifests and is interpreted through the neural circuits of the brain. The brain, in this sense, would be the channel or interface through which the transcendent experience is felt, understood, and integrated into consciousness. It is the lens through which the human perceives the transcendent, and the perception of boundaries between the body and the environment can significantly decrease during deep meditative states. This reduction in activity can lead to a sense of ego dissolution, emerging with the environment or the universe. Regardless of its ultimate origin, the validity and power of his experience are undeniable. Connecting Paul's past with the present of neurotheology allows us a richer and more integrated perspective, where science does not diminish the mystery, but perhaps reveals its complexity and the depth of our own existence and our capacity to experience the sacred. And a union with the divine, an experience frequently reported by mystics from various traditions. Furthermore, transcranial magnetic stimulation in certain regions of the temporal and parietal lobes has been associated with inducing sensations of a presence or altered consciousness in some individuals, suggesting that certain brain activations can indeed generate perceptions of an other reality. This field does not aim to debunk faith, but rather to understand the complex interaction between the human brain and religious experience. Neurotheology does not seek to prove or disprove the existence of God or supernatural. Instead, it investigates the neural bases of religious and mystical experience. It aims to understand how the human brain processes and generates phenomena associated with faith, spirituality, transcendence, and altered states of consciousness that are frequently reported in religious contexts. Scientists have utilized advanced neuroimaging technologies, such as functional magnetic resonance imaging and electroencephalography, to map brain activity in individuals during deep religious and meditative practices. What these studies have revealed is that, in fact, certain patterns of brain activity are consistently associated with mystical and religious experiences. These findings suggest that the brain is not merely a passive recipient for religious experience. It is an active organ that participates in the construction and interpretation of these experiences. The broader implications of the central theme lead us to consider that science and faith do not need to be mutually exclusive. For Paul, the experience was undeniably transformative, resulting in a devotion and mission that shaped the history of Christianity as we know it. Throughout this exploration, we have navigated between faith and science, biblical narrative and neurological discoveries, attempting to decipher the enigma of Paul's conversion. We now reach the point where we recognize that the complexity of the central theme lies not only in the duality between miracle and neurological attack. The hypothesis of temporal lobe epilepsy, as we've seen, offers a coherent and plausible model that aligns remarkably with many of the symptoms reported by Paul: the intense light, the selective voice, temporary blindness, and radical life transformation. We can analyze symptoms, propose differential diagnoses, speculate about the nature of reality and the interactions between mind and body. But the subjective experience, the depth of psychological impact, and the spiritual meaning of an event like Paul's conversion are multifaceted and cannot be encapsulated by a single explanation. The radicalness of his transformation, from a zealous persecutor to a tireless devotee who suffered and died for the cause he once fought against, suggests a depth of change that goes beyond a simple physiological event, or at least a physiological event with spiritual and psychological implications of extraordinary and lasting magnitude. Paul didn't just have a vision. His entire life was redefined. It allows us to demystify, to some extent, events previously considered purely supernatural by placing them within a biological and neurophysiological framework. It is an opportunity to reflect on the intrinsic complexity of the human mind, the inexhaustible depth of faith, and the limits of our knowledge. The mystery surrounding the road to Damascus does not diminish its importance, but rather enhances it, inviting us to keep an open mind, to embrace uncertainty, and to recognize the beauty of the intersection between the material and the immaterial, and to ponder what, perhaps, will always transcend our complete understanding, remaining a testament to the power of the inexplicable. However, even science, with all its advancements in sophistication, encounters fundamental limits. The human brain, with its intricate network of billions of neurons, which generates consciousness, perception, and subjective experiences, remains the most complex and mysterious structure known in the universe. We cannot simply reduce all human experience, especially the deepest, most transformative, and spiritually meaningful ones, to mere electrical discharges or biochemical processes. Science describes the how phenomena occur, but the why and the ultimate meaning, the qualia of the experience, often remain beyond its explanatory grasp, but also in the inherent limits of our own ability to comprehend the totality of human experience and reality. For believers, Paul's experience is a direct divine intervention, an unquestionable sign of God's presence and power acting in human history. Faith deals with meaning, purpose, revelation, and the transcendent, with what lies beyond what can be measured and quantified. It embraces mystery, seeing it not as a failure of understanding or a gap to be filled by science, but as an invitation to awe, humility, and the pursuit of an understanding that goes beyond empirical reason. For faith, Paul's experience was a divine epiphany, a personal encounter with the resurrected Christ that demanded a total response and a complete reorientation of life. Paul's story, in its essence, confronts us with what remains beyond our explanatory reach. Science, with its rigorous tools and methods, seeks explanations based on observable and replicable evidence. On the other hand, faith offers an interpretive framework that transcends the purely material and measurable. What Paul's story, through its multiple lenses, truly reveals is the limitation of human understanding in the face of the extraordinary and the transcendent. Therefore, we conclude that the discussion about Paul's conversion is not an either-or debate. Paul's journey on the road to Damascus, with its light, voice, and transformation, echoes through the centuries, challenging us to ponder the fine line between miracle and the intricate workings of our own mind. Was it divine intervention or the activation of a neural circuit? Perhaps the answer lies in the human capacity to experience the sacred in its many forms, regardless of its ultimate origin. What does this story make you feel? What do you believe truly happened? The mystery remains, inviting your own reflection